and good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to At America. Ooh, I love the spirit. Thank you. So, welcome to At America, everyone. My name is Sadila. I am one of the e-guides here in At America, and I would like to welcome all of our audience joining us here with me and those who are watching us online. We hope that all of you are doing great and staying safe. For those of you who are new here, At America is the U.S. Embassy's American Center, and this is a place for everyone to learn more about the United States through our events, programs, facilities, and so much more. And our special event today is titled Disaster Preparedness Preparing for the Unpredictable. But before we start the event, I have here a little trivia question for those who are watching us online. And the question is, when was the American Red Cross founded? Is it A, 1870, B, 1881, C, 1901, or D, 1990? You can submit your answers through our social media platforms. And for those of you who can be the fastest to answer it correctly, will get a live shout out from us at the end of our event. And now let us hear an opening remark from the Deputy Cultural Attaché and Ad America Director from the U.S. Embassy Jakarta. Everyone, please welcome Abraham Lee.
Thank you, everyone. Selamat pagi, Bapak Ibu, though I think this is a younger crowd. Um, my name is Abraham Lee. I'm the Deputy Cultural Affairs Officer at the U.S. Embassy in Jakarta. I'm also the Director for At America. Recently arrived in Jakarta 3 weeks ago. And it's interesting because when you arrive in a new country, one of the things you notice are all the things that are different, right, about this place from home, right? The traffic, the noise, the weather. People drive on the left here instead of the right. Um, but it's interesting. One thing back home is I grew up in right outside Washington D.C., and of course we have big tall office buildings. I go to work every day, and the elevator. You always notice in every elevator, right? It says in the event of fire, right? Don't use the elevator, right? Use marked exit stairways, right? And when I came to Jakarta, and we live in this kind of tall apartment building, and I took the elevator for the first time, and do you know what I noticed? It says something different. It says, in the event of fire or earthquake, do not use the elevator. Use marked exit stairways. And I thought, oh, I'm in Jakarta. Earthquakes happen here. And my kids saw that, and I pointed out, and they're like, earthquakes? And I'm like, yep. And volcanoes and floods, right? And so all kinds of different things happen here in Indonesia compared to where I grew up in the United States. And that is all about understanding and being aware of your environment, right? And part of today's talk is about being prepared, right? Part of being prepared is being aware. And so I'm really looking forward to today's talk from our panel of guests today. And part of the reason I'm also really just kind of excited to hear from them is that I hope to learn a lot from them. But also you'll find that all of them are either college students or going to be college students. And what's great about that is that here in Indonesia, as you guys know, the majority of the population is under 30. And so one of the shared values we have here, both in the United States and here in Indonesia, is the fact that we want to really encourage youth engagement in our community. This is a really great panel to really learn about young people who have decided to volunteer in their communities and to give back and to make a difference and to help people. And I think that's another shared value we have, right? The American Red Cross and the disaster preparedness and the disaster relief and the work they do is about helping people. So one of the great things about At America is that we're all about shared values. We want to connect with Indonesians. We want to take what we know as Americans and connect with Indonesians and realize that we do really share many of the same ideals and values, even though things may seem very different. And so I'm really just excited about today's talk. I'm really excited to learn a lot. I hope you'll ask lots of questions, those of you here in person or online, and really have an opportunity to engage with our really just amazing group of panelists. So thank you so much for coming, and looking forward to a really great discussion today. Thanks.
Thank you so much to Pa Abraham for the wonderful opening remarks. And now I'm pretty sure that everyone here is already excited to jump into our discussion today. So without further ado, I would like to pass the stage to our moderator, Elsha Yubila K. Naya.
Thank you so much for the very kind introduction. Okay, good afternoon, everyone. Hello, hello. Oh my God, I still hear some lack of enthusiasm though. I would like to hear your voice once again. Good afternoon, everyone. Oh my God, that's a good noise. Okay, so welcome everyone to this afternoon's event. Today we are going to talk about disaster preparedness, preparing for the unpredictable. And as our EGAT says, so I'm Elsie Casey. I will be your moderator for like the next 90 minutes, and I will guide you guys, and I will try to accompany you guys through our discussion this afternoon. Okay, so first of all, I would like to welcome the director of the At America to Mr. Abraham Lee. Thank you so much for coming. And also to the representative of American Red Cross Volunteer Service National Headquarters, to Linda Sisik. Thank you so much for coming. To the representative of the American Red Cross Indonesia delegation, to Mas Haris, to Mbak Dinar, and to Mbak Isma. Thank you so much for the support. Okay, I would like also to greet all of you guys that have joined online through our platform. Hello, hello everyone. Thank you so much for coming. Thank you so much for joining our event. To all of you guys that have joined through our Twitter, our Facebook, our YouTube, and through our Instagram, thank you so much. And if you guys have any question, do not hesitate to type it down in the comment section, and we will answer your question later on in the Q&A session. Okay, so for this afternoon session, we will talk about something very interesting. As Mr. Abraham Lee said before, we're going to talk about the Red Cross volunteerism, especially about American Red Cross volunteerism. And in the previous session, we already talked about how Indonesian Red Cross is evolving right now. But in this afternoon session, we will discuss much further into how we will learn and discuss about the Red Cross volunteer work in the USA. We will also gain knowledge about disaster preparedness education and the international humanitarian law. Okay, so to discuss about this topic, we have several speakers who engage in the national program in the Red Cross itself. Without further ado, I will introduce our first speaker. He is the chair of the National Youth Council of the American Red Cross and member of the National Diversity Advisory Council, and currently studying as computer science and mathematics at the University of California at Los Angeles. He is Shivam Kabur. Thank you so much for coming, Shivam. Okay, our second speaker. He is the International Humanitarian Law Youth Action Campaign Coordinator and IHL YIC advocate. And she is right now studying history, justice, and sustainable food system at Arizona State University. She is Cara Elsie. Welcome to the stage. And our third speaker, he is right now working group lead of the American Red Cross National Youth Council and coordinator for International Humanitarian Law Youth Action Campaign. Currently, she is studying finance and healthcare management at the University of Pennsylvania. She is Sissy Wang. And right now, our latest speaker, she is Sarah Kokar. She is the International Humanitarian Law Youth Action Campaign advocate, and she is right now planning to study psychology, medicine, and society at the University of Houston this upcoming fall. This is Sarah Kokar. Okay, thank you so much, Hivum, Kara, and Sisi for attending this afternoon program. But before we get into our discussion, we will have some little quiz for warm up. Okay. So don't worry, guys. This is not like kind of a national exam, and this is not kind of like an exam where if you don't do well and then you will get punished or so on. Don't worry. We will have fun in here. And also our speakers, they will help you guys. They will give some hints. So right now, as you see in our screen and in your screen as well, if you guys joining online, you can see there is a barcode right there. You can just go through the www.kahoot.id and then enter the PIN number, and we will have some questions. The game PIN is 8217259. And you can also just scan the barcode right there through your camera, and then you can join. Don't worry about the name. You can use your name. You can use your fake name. You can use someone else's name. You can use your mother name, your father name, your friend's name. Don't worry about that. Okay, so right now we have Ata, we have Idris, Nana, and one, two, three. Oh, people are coming up. We have 11 people right now. Twelve right now. Okay, still coming. 13. Okay, we start right now. So be ready for the first question in three, two, one. Here we go. When you hear a smoke alarm in your home, what is the first step to take? So, Sarah, can you give us a hint about the answer? We have 10 seconds left. Any hints from you guys? Oh, okay. Oh, that's actually very good. 13 people got it right. Okay. Oh, here's the scoreboard. Ellery, right now, she is the number one. Okay, we will go to the next question in a minute. Which of the following is the most important action during an earthquake? Any of you guys want to give like some hints or something?
Maybe a quick hint is Abraham was talking a little bit earlier about an elevator system. So if you want to think you want to use an elevator or not during an earthquake.
Thank you for the hints. Okay. Ooh, EL. Just overtake Valerie. Okay, the next one. What is the recommended method for treating a minor burn? You can apply ice directly. You can run in cold water over the burn. You can apply butter or oil to the burn or any blisters that form. What would be the right answer? Oh, it's running cool water over the burn for several minutes. And so, this is our last question. What is the purpose of creating a personal emergency kit? You have essential supplies readily available or to provide a means of communication. to provide a means of communication during a disaster. Oh, there's two same option. And then to document personal identification and important documents. Okay, very good. Let's see the podium. Oh, VK. Number 2 is Brian. And number 1 is drum roll. EL. Give a round of applause for EL, Brian, and VK. May I know who is EL? Who is EL? Or maybe EL is joining online right now? Okay, maybe EL is joining online. Who is Brian? Is Brian here? Who is Brian? Don't be shy, Brian. Okay, I think Brian is also joining online. And the third one, who is PK? Ah! Okay. Thank you so much for participating in this little quiz. And without further ado, we will go into our presentation session. And in this session, we will hear the four of our speaker. They will do presentation, and then after the presentation, we will have the Q&A session. Okay, to Sarah, Sisi, Kara, and Shivum, the stage is yours.
Thank you, thank you. So before we get started, can I have the clicker by any chance? I think it's just right next to the laptop there. But in the meantime, thank you so much for everybody coming to our presentation today. So again, my name is Shivam Kapoor. I'm the chair of the National Youth Council, and every presenter here today is part of our youth and young adult program here at the American Red Cross. And we're very, very excited to talk a little bit about what we do in terms of disaster preparedness and how youth volunteers within the United States engage with the Red Cross in all our lines of service. So thank you so much for everybody tuning in online and here in person. Really appreciate you all. And again, any questions, we're going to have a Q&A session at the end, an open Q&A session, so you could save those towards the end. So just a quick table of contents, what we're going to cover. We'll talk a little bit about generally what we do in terms of youth programming, the ways we engage youth volunteers. We'll go into, right after that, into Map Swipe, a really cool and innovative way to help humanitarian organizations across the entire world. And then we'll talk a little bit about international disaster relief and how youth volunteers are engaged with that. And we'll end it off with disaster preparedness, specifically in the youth sphere. So I'm really excited to get started with youth programming, and I'm going to pass it over to Sissy to give a general overview, some statistics as well.
All right. Thank you, Shivam, for the introduction. So here at the American Red Cross, we are very, very proud of our youth programming. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to kick it off with some statistics about our youth volunteerism. So you see here that we've blocked out the numbers for now. So I want you guys to, put on your thinking caps, kind of consider what the numbers might be. So for the number of youth volunteers, I'll start this one off. We have 40,000 youth volunteers. That is an incredible number that is fast growing, and we love to see that number grow because it means we're engaging more and more youth in the volunteer space. Our next number is our high school and collegiate clubs. So clubs are a group through which our volunteers can conduct service through, and within the American Red Cross, we have 1,033 clubs. I want some claps for that. I'm not hearing claps. All right, this third number here is the hours logged by our youth volunteers this year. So any service that our volunteers do, they will log hours through a platform that we have called Volunteer Connection. And through that, we can track the exact numbers that they log within this year. And within this year, we've done 350,000 hours. All right, I won't ask because maybe you guys are a little shy, but I want you guys to think through how many hours you think have been logged within the last 3 years. Give it a few seconds, more for the pride, and then I'll reveal it. And if, you get it close, then you can be very proud of yourselves. 1.2 million hours have been logged by our youth volunteers within the last 3 years. So I'm glad that we were able to go through this slide and share with you how proud we are of all of our youth volunteers. And I will now pass it on back to Shivam to talk about empowerment.
Amazing, amazing. Thank you so much, Sissy. And again, we were very, very proud of the amount of work that our youth volunteers have been putting in for the last couple of years. And so big shout out to Sissy for going over that. The next slide, we're going to talk about empowerment. So that is really a core pillar of our youth programming at the American Red Cross, is to empower our youth volunteers to make change in their own community. Personally, that was the way I started off with the organization and why I found a home at the American Red Cross, because we have such an important values on empowerment. We give the resources and support to let our youth and young adult volunteers empower themselves to create change in their community. And there's multiple ways that they do that. We're going to cover it in today's presentation. One of the ways is through our Sound the Alarm campaign. So for those who are unfamiliar with the Sound the Alarm campaign, it is a massive campaign, the American Red Cross, where we go into communities that are at risk for home fires and install two things, really. We install smoke alarms for free, and we also educate homeowners and their families on how to escape home fires. We create plans, help them create kits, and overall educate them on what home fires are, as well as how to avoid them potentially by moving things around their house and creating a plan. A very key proponent of that is youth volunteers. Youth volunteers are able to go into houses, communicate with kids. We have some kids here as well, but also install some smoke alarms as well. So it's a great way for youth volunteers to engage. Another way is through blood donations. Life-saving blood is extremely important to everybody here, and youth volunteers are able to do multiple things. Donate blood while also hosting blood drives. Our collegiate and high school blood drives are one of the main ways the American Red Cross actually gets blood and supports biomedical services. And so youth volunteers play a massive role in empowering themselves and creating change. A third one is missing maps, which I'll hold off a little bit because I'm going to be talking about that in a second here. But lastly, preparedness as well. And so we'll be talking about preparedness as well as missing maps on how youth volunteers are able to create those changes in their communities by themselves, by empowering themselves in schools, outside of school, while also in their own communities as well. Cool, so I'm going to go into MapSwipe right now, and we'll cover a couple things. What MapSwipe is, show of hands here, does anybody know what MapSwipe is or missing maps? Couple hands, couple hands. We'll cover a little bit about what that is, and we're also going to go into how you all, right after this presentation, can actually engage in MapSwipe and help your communities out. So I'm going to show a picture right here. Hopefully you all can see. It's a little dark, I know, on purpose, but this is what the mapping looked like in 2014. When I say mapping, this means what, has anyone used Google Maps here? I think we can get more show of hands at Google Maps here. We're talking about, traffic. I think that's one of the ways we avoid traffic is using Google Maps. This is what mapping looked like in 2014. You can see much of North America, Europe, and parts of East Asia have been accurately mapped in areas of our communities in Google Maps or Apple Maps, or popular mapping services. But what you do see is many parts of South America, Africa, and Central Asia are not mapped. So these are areas where we don't necessarily know where roads are, houses are, schools, and buildings. And so it's very difficult to, one, find your way through traffic, but also, two, deliver humanitarian services. So we'll talk a little bit about what that looks like. But I want to show another picture on 2020. So you can see a whole lot more lights on where mapping has happened. There's a whole lot more work that still needs to be done in these communities, but we've come much ways from 2014 in mapping. And so we're really excited to talk about how we've done that, the progress, and what's more to come, and specifically how youth volunteers have supported. So what we map and what MapSwipe is. So MapSwipe and missing maps, and I'll talk about the distinction, is a platform where you're able to take satellite imagery, what Google Maps and Apple Maps is really based on, and pinpoint where buildings are, roads, rivers, and other locations that are seen on this slide. And you'll be thinking, like, why do we need to know that? I think you can see at a picture and tell where a building is. The reason we do that is, one, to tell where people are actually living. Where are these communities in a map? And in the case of an emergency, for example, an earthquake or a hurricane or a landslide, where do our humanitarian organizations, such as the Red Cross, need to go to deliver that life-saving help? Whether it's setting up tents or evacuation centers in hospitals or places of worship, if it's delivering vaccines and administering those vaccines in schools for children at risk for measles. Many of those reasons are attacked by, sorry, helped by advanced mapping, so we can know, where people are and where people need aid in, God forbid, an accident or a disaster. So these are some of those things that we map. Another thing is how we map, and we map them through mapathons. So many volunteers, many people that are youth volunteers as well, are able to come together in certain areas, such as a school club that Sissy was talking about, or even at a corporate event, and map satellite imagery to some of our sources, such as OpenStreetMaps. They're able to come together as a community to administer these mappings and send it to another system, which is MapSwipe, which we'll talk about, to verify those images as well. And these humanitarian organizations are able to use that mapping to find places where people live and potentially save lives. So here are a couple statistics. We love numbers. You'll see a lot of numbers throughout this presentation. But here are a couple statistics of what we've mapped, how much we've mapped, and how much of a change we've actually made. So there have been 95,000 individual contributors over the course of the last 5 years with the MapSwipe organization. This means 95,000 people across the entire world have come together and mapped many places around the world. And many of these people put in dozens of hours a week in making sure that these maps are accurate. We've also mapped 3.4 million kilometers of mapping across the entire world. These are basically chunks of a couple acres at a time. You're able to tell where the buildings are. We've also finished over 2,000 projects, and a project, for example, could be a small town or a community in a rural area. And so 2,000 of those have been successfully mapped as of now. Now, there's also been a shift. So the American Red Cross historically has done the mapping, so the earlier part of the program, actually looking through the pictures and finding out where the buildings and roads and rivers are. But we've actually made a little bit of a shift, and we're on the latter half of that, which is basically verifying that the mapping that's already done is accurate and up to date. And so youth volunteers have been putting dozens and dozens of hours in verifying mapping just from the palm of their phone, palm of their hand. So all this happens on your phone in an app called MapSwipe. And all of you all, it's available worldwide. You can actually download that today and start verifying maps and contributing to this global movement. So here are a couple of links as well. We love QR codes. I know everybody here could be on a laptop, so you can take a picture. Everybody here has their phones as well. There's 2 links up here. The one on the left is a missing maps landing page. So you can think about finding time in your day to actually map these communities. So that's what you can do on the left. It's a Red Cross landing page. And the one on the left, and on the right, we have the MapSwipe landing page to learn a little bit more about the verification process of mapping. So these are 2 amazing ways that youth volunteers have contributed and actually spearheaded initiatives using technology to help with humanitarian aid services on the later half of things. So that was a little bit about MapSwipe. Here are a couple of our founders and members. You can see a whole bunch of Red Cross logos on there, as well as non-Red Cross logos. A lot of this happens with collaboration and innovation. So we've partnered with numerous organizations to make this happen. I'm very proud about the work that we've done so far. So that's it, and I really appreciate you all listening a little bit about the MapSwipe. And now I'm going to pass it to Sarah and Kara to talk a little bit about our international disaster relief.
Thank you, Shivam, so much for that wonderful introduction to MapSwipe. So, as he was saying, MapSwipe is something that is mapping the entire world, and well, that's the goal. We're trying to map everywhere, and a lot of that has to do with international disaster relief. So, at the American Red Cross, there is a focus on disaster relief, both domestically and internationally. And I'm going to be talking a little bit about how that relates to youth programming. So, at the American Red Cross, like I said, there's a big focus on disaster relief, and within youth programming specifically, there's a focus on something called international humanitarian law. So international humanitarian law is a set of rules that seek for humanitarian reasons to limit the effects of armed conflict. And within international humanitarian law, there is 4 principles. So the principle of military necessity, the principle of limiting unnecessary suffering, the principle of distinction, and the principle of proportionality. The principle of military necessity states that no action can be taken within an armed conflict unless it is of strict military necessity and there is a clear objective that the military is trying to achieve. So no needless acts of destruction, basically. And the principle of limiting unnecessary suffering is pretty self-explanatory. you can't do anything that is causing unnecessary suffering to the person who could potentially be injured from the act of war that you're about to perform. Then there's the principle of distinction, which is about distinguishing between civilians and combatants. So civilians can't be harmed under international humanitarian law. And lastly, there's the principle of proportionality, which states that the act that you're going to do must be proportional to the impact of it. So if it's a very small advantage that's going to be gained, there can't be an extreme impact, especially if it is going to impact civilians. So the international like I was saying, international humanitarian law is a big focus within the American Red Cross. And there's something called the International Humanitarian Law Youth Action Campaign. And so the Youth Action Campaign focuses on educating youth, and then they host events that educate other youth. So it's really about youth leading youth and educating them about what's going on in the world, international humanitarian law, global events, and these events that youth host through the International Humanitarian Law Youth Action Campaign are often the first interaction that a lot of these people are having with the concept of international humanitarian law, and sometimes with the concept of international disaster relief. And so these programs create youth who are more aware and more ready to act when disaster strikes domestically and abroad, and makes them more aware of global events, which allows them to get involved in international disaster relief programs and disaster relief programs within the United States. So for the 2022-2023 International Humanitarian Law Youth Action Campaign cycle, one of the focuses was the Ukraine crisis. And we really wanted to focus on how does this relate to international humanitarian law, and how does this relate to international disaster relief? So here's one example. In the days before Russia fully invaded Ukraine in February of 2022, various water facilities in eastern Ukraine were reportedly damaged, which left over 90,000 Ukrainians with insecure water access. Now, I just mentioned the 4 principles of international humanitarian law, and this clearly violates one of them. So, based on what I said about the 4 principles, does anyone have a guess for which principle this action violated? Does anyone want to guess? Okay. So it's a very clear violation of the principle of distinction, because the water was used by civilians and combatants. So the principle of distinction, like I stated, you have to distinguish between those who are actively involved in the international armed conflict, combatants, and civilians. And so 90,000 Ukrainians, 90,000 civilians were left with insecure water access, which is a clear violation of that principle. And the youth advocates who were trained in international humanitarian law were able to see this, and they were able to educate other youth. And so events like this exacerbate issues like drought and starvation that are already issues during international armed conflicts. And so this is a clear example of taking the information that we've learned and sharing it with other people so that the youth are able to go out and get involved in international disaster relief. And now I'm going to pass it to Sarah for another example.
Thank you so much, Kara. So, like Kara said, the International Humanitarian Law Youth Action Program is one of the many programs in the American Red Cross that not only allow youth to kind of catch a glimpse and get some awareness on what international disasters are out there in the world, but directly take action. So one of the first examples we have up here is Typhoon Haiyan, and this took place in the Philippines in 2013. So within this disaster, 1.1 million tons of crops were lost. $724 million went towards repairing this. 1.5 million acres of farmland were destroyed, and 4 million people were displaced. So the issue that comes up with this is that because of the displacement of people and the food disparity, this ultimately leads to more poverty. And within this poverty, it also leads to more conflict because there is a lack of resources to be given. So one of the first, so a youth spotlight that was kind of done after this typhoon was IHL Yakima Youth did a case study event focusing on educating youth on how environmental destruction relates to international conflicts. And within their case study event, they actually did a direct focus on the Typhoon Haiyan crisis. And within this event, they got to reach 1,100 youth. And once again, just to reiterate, this is an example of how when youth are given the chance to become aware about specific conflicts around the world, such as Typhoon Haiyan, they can create an impact in a unique way, like IHL Yakima Youth with their case studies. And what this impact does is that it reaches more youth and it also empowers youth to become more involved in international disaster relief where they are from or worldwide. So the second example I would like to give has to do with the Afghanistan crisis. So due to its low socioeconomic development, Afghanistan is very susceptible to disasters, and it's frequently causes the loss of lives and the public and private property. So 9 million people have been affected by natural catastrophes since 1980, and over 20,000 people have died as a result. So because of its low socioeconomic status, Afghanistan is more prone to natural disasters like drought. So our youth spotlight here is from Hightower High School Red Cross Club in Missouri City, Texas. And what this club did is that they partnered with their school's Muslim Student Association and a local organization called Houston Welcomes Refugees. And what they did was that they held a refugee drive to collect hygiene materials for Afghanistan refugees to receive. And again, this is also just another incredible example of the importance of giving youth awareness on international disasters, such as the Afghanistan crisis. So that way they can uniquely come up with ways to directly get involved and also empower other youth to do the same. So 123 youth volunteers were reached with this activity, and 267 items were donated in total. So awareness, action, and empowerment. These are the 3 words we would use to kind of describe how the International Humanitarian Law Youth Action Campaign ties in with disaster preparedness. The IHL Youth Action Campaign not only allows kids to learn about the principles of international humanitarian law, but it also gives them a glimpse into real-life world events that they can apply these principles towards. What this does is that it allows them to recognize an issue and take action. This action can be done with, like we said, that case study event or a refugee drive, and this action reaches other youth. It also empowers other youth. It empowers other youth to raise awareness towards other youth and also take action to empower other youth with international disaster relief worldwide. So not only do they act in terms of international humanitarian law, but it also just gives them the chance to explore those borders and also work with international disaster relief near them and worldwide. So 295,000 people were educated on international disaster relief and international humanitarian law during the 2022-2023 year. So now I'm going to pass it back to Sissy and Shivams to talk about disaster preparedness.
Yes, thank you, Sarah, for sharing about the IHL Youth Action Campaign. All right, so now we've heard a lot about how, we engage some of our high school students, how we engage some college students, like my team and myself. But now we want to talk a little bit about how we engage even younger students. And we will focus on a few items in disaster preparedness, because I want to remind us of our theme of preparing for the unpredictable. And like Abraham's story, and I know there's a few little ones in the crowd as well earlier, but it's very important to also make sure that these very young ones are educated. So on the screen here, we have a lot of little young ones being educated in crowds in their schools and little programs, and they learn more about disasters. And one of the programs that we have with the American Red Cross is Prepare with Pedro. So Prepare with Pedro is a preparedness education program for grades K through 2. So that's very young. Little 5-year-olds are learning more about the disasters, and a lot of the content will cater towards these young ones. So, through our Prepare with Pedro program, we have various books, which later Shivam will be able to hand out a few for our in-person audience here. But essentially, what we have here on the slide is that students are able to learn more about coping skills and about preparedness skills during these storybook sessions, and they can learn about disasters and also how to be prepared. So here we have a series of our Prepare with Pedro books, and Shivam, I believe, there's a few books. I think if we can hand them out to some of our in-person audience here, that'd be perfect. Thank you. So I want to talk a little bit about the accessibility and variety of the books that we have with the Prepare with Pedro program. So within these storybooks, we have translated them to over 6 languages, from English, Spanish, Vietnamese, Korean, and Chinese, simplified and traditional. So through this program, we're able to increase the accessibility of students who may be growing up in different language households and allow them to also understand these disasters that may be happening in emergencies. Thank you, Dinar, for handing out those books. And then also, I want to quickly go over some of the topics that we have with our Prepare with Pedro series. We have hurricanes, typhoons, home fire, shelter, hand washing, earthquake, extreme heat, flood, power outages, and more. So there's obvious variety in the different types of disasters that you can educate your students and little young ones at home with. So, in addition to our Prepare with Pedro program, we have the Pillowcase Project. So as you can see, these 2 elementary schoolers over here with their pillowcases, all learned up about disaster relief and things like that. So our Pillowcase Project is another preparedness education program, but this time targeting students who are grades 3 through 5. This teaches students more about personal and family preparedness and safety skills. So it's along the same lines, but a little bit more on the interactive side of things, where upon completion of this educational program, a lot of our students will receive these pillowcases, which they can decorate and create as essentially their personal emergency supply kit. So again, some of the points that we are making on this page is that this program is great for school programs, after-school programs, Girl and Boy Scout programs, just that we can have a large amount of outreach to our young ones. And with that, I will pass it on to Shivam to give you some of our contact information with any questions.
Awesome. Thank you. Thank you. Let's get a round of applause for Sissy. So we are just closing in a second here, but I wanted to share some contact information for everyone that's on the stage. Our emails are on the stage, are on the screen right there, and we're very open to receiving any questions after this presentation if we aren't able to catch some of them. But also for the people that are at home, if you have questions that you want to ask or anything at all, we're open to chat. Send us an email. We also want to plug, a little shameless plug to our Youth Wire. So what is Youth Wire? It is a monthly subscription for youth and young adult volunteers and people that are interested to learning about, what are youth volunteers doing at the American Red Cross in a newsletter format that's very digital. So you get an email once a month about Youth Wire, and it's very easy to subscribe. All you got to do is send an email to youthinvolvement@redcross.org and just add in the subject line that you're interested to subscribe to Youth Wire. So it's a very cool way that you can very easily just get to know a little bit more about youth volunteering. And lastly, we have a website as well, redcross.org/redcrossyouth.html. So it's on the slide. Feel free to take a picture, or anyone watching at home to note down the slide. Another area that you can get engaged in to just learn a little bit more about what we're doing is our Instagram. So we have 2 on the stage. Again, it's QR code. It'll go right to Instagram. One on our American Red Cross Youth account, and one just our general American Red Cross account. So take a picture and feel free to get that QR code. And our last slide is a thank you slide. Before we applause and we sort of finish off, I want to add a quick action item after this. You've learned about what the American Red Cross does with youth engagement, but what do we do now? So you learn all about this. What's the action? What can you do after this when you go home? And a lot of it is giving opportunities to youth and really understanding that everyone on this stage and 40,000 other people that are back home and thousands of other volunteers across the world are going to be the adult workforce, are going to be the leaders in our communities, the people making laws, the people making actual change in our communities. And it's very important that we both educate and empower them at a young age. And so they have those skills, that knowledge, and the experience. So when they do get to a much older stage, when they all, are the people that are our adult workforce, both volunteering in the corporate world and the nonprofit world, they're educated and experienced and even empowered to make the right decisions for themselves and the right decisions for the people next to them, their communities, their families, their countries. So it's very important that we start at a young age, and we all get those opportunities, open those doors, and support the volunteers, the youth volunteers in our lives to give them a helping hand to accomplish whatever they would like. So I want to say thank you to everybody on the stage. Thank you everybody for tuning in online and in person for just listening to a little bit about what we have to say, the American Red Cross. Thank you so much.
Okay. Can I ask for some applause for 4 of our speakers? I mean, for me, I learned a lot from that presentation because that's such a very insightful and full of knowledge. I learned a lot. So thank you guys. So before I open the Q&A for the online and the offline, I would also encourage you guys to type down if you guys have any questions. You can type down on the comment section. And also for all of you guys, I would open the floor. If anyone have a question in here, you can raise your hand. We can help for the discussion. We can also ask if any of you guys want to ask about how the process going and so on. You can ask. Okay, so in the meantime, I will also ask them because I have a lot of questions. Okay, so guys, I want to know like what's the process of you in developing the program? Like, how did you guys come up with the idea of doing the IHL? Maybe one of you wanna like try to explain how did the idea of IHL campaign, IHL program came up in the first place?
I can do that. So we
Okay.
actually, none of us created that program, but
Mhm.
the goal of the International Humanitarian Law Youth Action Campaign is to educate youth and have them educate other youth on international humanitarian law. Because one of the principles of IHL, one of the goals of one of the goals of the Red Cross, it's actually one of the goals of the American Red Cross, is to educate the public on international humanitarian law. So in addition to the IHL Youth Action Campaign, the adult service to the armed forces and international services also has an adult international humanitarian law program that educates adults. So this is the youth side of that program. And the reason that that program was started, as well as the IHL Youth Action Campaign, was because educating on international humanitarian law is a goal of the American Red Cross.
Okay. So when did the program start? At the very first time? Like how many years ago? How when did the program first start? The IHL campaign?
The youth program?
No, the IHL campaign itself for the IHL campaign.
It started a while ago. I'm not sure exactly how many years, but I can
Mhm.
get that information to you and we can put
Mhm.
it, we could send it out.
Okay, so it's been like quiet sometimes, and you guys developing it, and you guys doing it for quiet like some years or so.
Yeah, so for
Mhm.
the youth action campaign specifically,
Mhm.
each year there's a different topic.
Mhm.
So last year, the 2022-2023 cycle, the topic was international humanitarian law and the
Mhm.
environment. So how those two things interact with each other. The previous year, it was international humanitarian law and the protection of cultural property. The year before that, it was international humanitarian law and education in war. And the year before that, it was autonomous weapons. And our theme for the next year is actually nuclear weapons.
Oh, so each years you guys have a different topic.
A different focus. We
Yeah, a
always
different
are
focus.
relating it to international humanitarian
Mhm.
law,
Mhm.
but each year we specifically want to focus on a subtopic of how that relates to IHL. But the first couple of sessions for any group is always just international humanitarian law and the basics of that and getting that out. But because we do it every year and we want it to be different every year, slightly different, we have a focus topic.
Mm, that's very interesting. And I also want to hear more about, do you guys can share to us, like, what's the response of the other youth volunteers or maybe the other people that non-volunteers, and what's the response of them when they first hear about IHL? Because Indonesia, a lot of people don't know about IHL. And I think also in US, people outside of the Red Cross community, maybe they still don't know about IHL. Can you share to us, like, what's their response?
Yeah, so I mean, it's generally positive. Social media is such a new and upcoming resource, and it's definitely a tenet of the IHL program, International Humanitarian Law, and we're leveraging that platform as, I mean, everybody here and a lot of people, in the audience as well and at home use social media to some degree. It's one of the fastest, easiest ways to transfer information and update people about current events. We get information by the second now, whereas a couple of years back it took several days and sometimes weeks to get information across the world. And so IHL, the Youth Action Campaign, leverages that social media, and the response currently is very positive. Many youth volunteers and youth across the country use social media, so it's very easy to integrate within their own life. It's using posts and stories, and so it's very easy to get that information. Currently, it's very popular, and you also mentioned that people are still learning about IHL, and that's one of our focuses and goals, to not only educate people in the U.S. but also globally. Many of these events are not only affecting people on the stage and people in this audience, but people across the entire world. So we're trying to expand that reach just a little bit, to use social media, leverage its power to transfer that information as much as we can.
Okay, thank you so much. And I will check again. Any one of you have some question? Or we can go to the online questions. We have some online questions going on in here. Okay, we could. I think we will go to the first online question. So the first one is that, other than the natural disaster, how is the American Red Cross help with emergency, other kind of emergency, kind of like maybe health kind of emergency, like we have COVID outbreak, or maybe previously, maybe you guys have kind of like some kind of health emergency. Maybe you can share your knowledge about like how you guys can help people to prepare better in terms of like emergency, especially the health or maybe other than the national disaster.
Yeah, we can talk about measles and rubella a little bit. So I can start off, and if anybody else here wants to add on. So measles and rubella is a epidemic happening primarily outside of the U.S., in Africa and areas in Asia as well. And it's very, very inexpensive to combat it by a vaccine. And so it costs about $1 to vaccinate a child for the disease. And so it's one of the most cost efficient vaccinations in the entire world, entire history. So the American Red Cross, one of the initiatives that we do is the Measles and Rubella Initiative. We've partnered with different societies across the world to both fundraise, but then also administer those vaccines to at-risk communities and at-risk children, primarily in Africa. So one of the things that youth volunteers do are hosting fundraising drives. We also host live stream fundraisers to accumulate funds to send to those organizations to do sort of two things. One, manufacture the vaccine, but also administer it. So the nurses getting them out in the communities, finding out where those communities are. So, a connection to MapSwipe, which you talked a little bit about earlier, and making sure that those kids are vaccinated against measles and rubella, which is, again, very, very cost efficient vaccination for just $1, and it could potentially save a life.
Okay, thank you so much. Hope that will answer your question in the online audience. Okay, so I will also have another question for you guys about MapSwipe. So is it kind of like an application that other people outside of the Red Cross community can use, or is it for the national volunteers to like locate where the disaster happening and how to help people in certain location? How does that work?
Yeah, sure. I can talk about that. It's very simple. So anybody here in the crowd right now can download the MapSwipe app. It's both offered on Apple App Store as well as Android, and it takes legitimately 2 minutes to create an account, verify your email, and start mapping. So people are able to create projects in certain areas. After disasters, this happens very frequently. If a hurricane happens in a certain community or flooding, and there's not adequate mapping in that specific area, people are able to create a project specifically for that, and everybody in this audience could potentially contribute to that project and help map. So it's not limited to Red Cross volunteers, and it's not limited to any age group, but it's very popular with youth volunteers as the old saying goes, we're always on our phone, so it's very easy for us to just go on our phone and start mapping. So it's very, very easy, and anybody here can download it right now.
Okay, so it's for all people. So all of you guys, we can start like downloading it through our phone, and we can start to like like locating, and then we can use the application as well, not only for volunteers and not only for American Red Cross. So please do download that, okay? We do have another online question going on in here. So the question is related to the war zone and like how the volunteer can contribute when there is a conflict going on, maybe an international conflict going on outside of America. How can Red Cross volunteer? They can help in war zone. Is that making sense? Like the question. Any of you can help to answer that question?
Yeah, so within the American Red Cross, there are people who deploy internationally to disaster zones. The American Red Cross actually just opened up new areas in Poland. There's also American Red Cross mobile staff that will go to different locations and deploy internationally. That's definitely something that the American Red Cross does, and it's something that American Red Cross and other Red Cross national societies are very involved when there are international disasters of getting volunteers there and making sure that they're doing everything they can to get the facilities up and running that the people in those disaster zones need and providing them the resources that they need to continue on during those disasters.
Okay, so do you guys also have some kind of, when there's a war going on, do you guys usually also do like an online campaign or something? Or maybe you guys try, oh, I noticed in the presentation that you guys do kind of like a donation, right? For the Afghanistan and so on.
Yeah, so that's actually like one of the amazing things about the International Humanitarian Law Youth Action Program is that while youth aren't directly going to these war zones and helping out in any way they can, they really are just taking the resources that they have and developing programs and activities that kind of relate to youth topics. So it does raise awareness on international humanitarian law. So that hopefully in the future, when youth have, you know, grown older and maybe in the future they would like to go out in person and actually help people in these war zones, they can do so. So that's one of the amazing things about IHL. It raises awareness to not only to youth but to people all over through social media and activities. So that's also just like a really wonderful way for people to not really get involved directly in the war zones, but to gain awareness and empower other people.
So hope that also answer your question, guys. So it's not only about like going to the war zone, but also you guys can involve in other ways, you know. And this kind of campaign, like the IHL campaign, that's actually a very good way on how you can help during international conflict going on. Okay, so I have another question because we're still waiting for another question. So, do you guys want to share, each of you? I think that would be great. During your experience so far, being a Red Cross volunteer, what obstacles do you guys find during your experience so far? Anyone will start? Shivam?
Yeah, sure, I can start. So I think one of the bigger obstacles I faced is convincing people that the work that we're doing is important. To many people, it's a little bit hard to wrap your head around, why we should spend time, energy, and potentially funds in youth volunteering, where the time, energy, and funds can be diverted towards other work that the organization does, such as humanitarian aid, IHL work, biomed with blood donations, and it really that key point that I mentioned at the end is very important. The work that we're doing now will pay dividends in the future, and a lot of it is readily available within our organization. There are several members of our senior leadership, people that make executive decisions at the American Red Cross that started off in high school or in college as volunteers, and we're given those opportunities at that age to learn about what does it mean to be a leader, what does it mean to empower yourselves and your peers and the people around you to create change, and they did pay dividends. They are now fantastic employees within the organizations, people making more change at that level. So that convincing part is a little bit hard, but that's why we are here today to share our stories, share about the work that we're doing, hopefully overcome that challenge. But very early on, it was a challenge to several people, convincing friends as well that it's important to volunteer, convincing teachers and peers and coworkers that you need time off for doing certain things. But hopefully, in the next couple of years, that's going to change. It's definitely making some progress now. Pass it to anyone else.
Okay. Next one. Anyone of you wanna answer?
I can go ahead and give my response to this because it's along some of the same lines, I think, as what Shivam was saying. But I think one of my challenges or obstacles has been really like not necessarily destroying, but I'll use it for now, destroying precedent and kind of setting new precedent as opposed to destroying it, and then kind of setting a precedent for both youth volunteerism and leadership, and also for kind of the diversity of programming that the American Red Cross offers. So, along with that first one, more setting precedent in terms of specific roles or positions in leadership that youth can actually hold. So, perhaps in the past, in history, maybe it's a role that only an adult holds. Really, overcoming that part of that convincing piece as well in terms of, bringing all the I guess reasons to the table as to why youth should be in a role and why they have the responsibility and capability and also confidence to be in a role that perhaps in the past had been held by adults. So that's one piece, kind of that youth versus adult space. And then I think another space that has been a challenge or obstacle is in terms of kind of convincing friends perhaps to volunteer if they're not necessarily as involved in perhaps the health biomedical space. So within the American Red Cross, I think good easy to say that a lot of people know it for kind of its biomedical support. We do a lot of amazing work with kind of blood donations and of course things like this. But in this presentation alone, we've talked about how much the American Red Cross does with disaster relief, with international programs, and really volunteers can be interested in anything from health to policy to law to any of those spaces. And I think what has been hard for me is convincing my friends that they can really find the space within the American Red Cross that they are most passionate about, and that it is really an accommodating space with such diverse resources, programs that will really touch on anything that they are most interested in.
Okay, it's very interesting because both of you mentioned about obstacles that convincing people is gonna be hard. So I will have a follow-up question on that. Anyone wanna share your experience?
Yeah, I think something with international humanitarian law specifically is like you were saying, a lot of people don't know what it is, they've never heard of it. And so when you're hosting events and you're promoting them as this is an event about international humanitarian law, trying to get the interest, because once you can get people there, most people come up after the event and say, wow, this is so interesting. I've never heard of this. This was fascinating. Why don't I learn more about this? Why isn't this something I hear about in school? But that initial draw, getting the initial pull of getting people to come to that first event and kind of hook them and make them interested and show how much it relates to politics, how much it relates to what's going on in the world generally, and they see how much it relates to things that impact them daily, then they're interested. But that first initial hook, because IHL is not something, international humanitarian law is not something that's discussed too often, just getting people to that first event and getting them interested in it.
Okay. Thank you. So, Sarah.
Yeah, adding on to what Kara said, I think one of the biggest struggles of hosting a youth action campaign is youth engagement. Specifically because the topics that we talk about, the words are a bit daunting. International humanitarian law, a
What is
mouthful.
that?
Yeah, it's a
Yeah. Yeah,
mouthful.
yeah, yeah.
So it definitely is difficult to kind of not only get youth interested, but to have youth persistently stay
Mm.
and take action with the program. So one of the ways that we kind of combat that is by taking the topic of international humanitarian law and whatever topic that we're focusing on that year, whether it be cultural property or the environment, and tying it into something that youth love. So, for
That's a
example,
good strategy.
yeah, so for example, in the PowerPoint, we talked about Hightower High School. And one of the things that they also did was tie international humanitarian law with Harry Potter, which is something that youth love.
Oh,
And I
that's
know that
very
we
smart.
also did this for Call of Duty, which is a
Mm.
video game that people love. So while it definitely is a struggle to get youth involved, there's so many ways that we take the topic of international humanitarian law and kind of um, make it easier to understand for people, so that way they're more inclined to join the program and participate and learn more.
Okay, so you actually just stole my question. My next question will be like how you guys like mitigate and how to you guys solve the obstacles, how you guys find the solution to like getting people, and then how you guys can uh, attract other people to be more interested into your program, all of the program, not only the IHL but also the map swipe and also disaster education and so on. But that's kind of like a very interesting point for me because you guys like combine the pop culture into the IHL, which is for me that's very entertaining and very interesting. And then I also agree with what Kara said that uh, actually when people already hear about IHL, most of the times people will be like, "Oh, it's very interesting. Like I wanna know more about that and why I didn't hear about it like in the first place." It will be like that. So yeah. To my next question will be like, how about the other program that you guys have other than the IHL? How you guys attract people, how you guys attract people to engage more with the map swipe, how you guys engage the young children 5 years old into Pedro and disaster education, how you guys do that?
Yeah, I can start off a little bit. I think a lot of it has to do with you know highlighting it and knowing that it exists. A lot of times there are opportunities or ways that you can engage with your community that you may not even know exist. So a lot of the work that Sissy and I are doing are highlighting those opportunities on our national social media accounts. So we're getting a lot more into Instagram and even TikTok on highlighting ways that youth volunteers can engage in their communities with specific positions, specific steps, 1 to N on how to register as a volunteer, steps on how to register for sound the alarms. I mentioned that. The reason behind that, I think, is what Kara mentioned. Once you start off and you get to know what that engagement or volunteering is like, it sort of hooks you. So we try to find some of those hooks to get a volunteer in as early as possible, show what the Red Cross has to offer. I think that's very important. Sissy mentioned a little bit about, there's a notion that we only do blood drives or we only respond to disasters.
Yeah, that's
Um,
also the same stereotype
in,
that they have in Indonesia
in
as well.
Indonesia. Yeah, that's what we learned at our trip here today. But we actually highlighted everything else. So we
Mhm.
try or trying our best to paint a much fuller picture on what the organization has to offer, and that's one of the ways one of the reasons why I love the organization. I started off as a sound the alarm volunteer, and that's the way I got engaged. But every year, almost every other month, I learn about another way that the organization helps the community, whether it's partnering with some organizations like Walmart or local
Mm.
food pantries to serve meals to disaster victims, or it's partnering with like streaming companies to host live streams to generate funds to host to support disaster services or to support measles and rubella. There's so many new and exciting and engaging ways to support the community that the organization's always doing. So one of the biggest things that we're doing, working on, is highlighting them. Anything else to add?
I just wanted to kind of add, kind of in my thought process. another thing that we do really to keep youth engaged is I think there's a lot of work that we do on the national level, whether that's with IHL programming or with general youth programming between Shivam and I, that is surrounded by creating a space that balances specificity and creativity. So I want to kind of go into that a little bit more. What does that mean? But I think what is really important for us is, creating those guides or those like activity guides or resource guides or PDF documents that we can distribute across the many, many volunteers that we have that specifically explains, what steps they can take to get started with a specific program, or specifically explains what their purpose or what the vision of the program is, so that, we can instill that general vision across all the youth volunteers. But where the creativity space comes in, I think is so important. So that specificity, being really specific about what the vision is, what the steps you can take are, brings people in because they have a solid idea of what next steps they need to take. But then keeping a room open for creativity and allowing, our youth volunteers to do so many of the incredible, creative activities that Kara and Sarah mentioned with the IHL program, is really important because in that sense, it gives, I think, a lot of our volunteers ownership of unique ideas that they've done in order to implement the specific goals that we have with a specific program, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, I think that's very interesting. Do you want to add something, Kara? About like how you guys like solve the obstacles that you get? About how you mentioned like the obstacle is like to engage people. Maybe you like have something to add.
Yeah, so like Sarah was mentioning, like the Harry Potter event, the pop culture events, once you can make the topic that you want to raise awareness on accessible and draw it to something people are already interested in, that makes it much easier to draw in volunteers. And a lot of times, once they see what you're doing, they are very interested in it. So I would say that the accessibility to the events is what really makes it more. That's how we really overcome that obstacle of making the events accessible, making them interesting, and making sure that we're tying it to something that youth are already interested in. I think that that's been really successful, and I've seen multiple youth action campaigns do that in the past, and it's always gone really well.
Yeah. So you guys made some really interesting point, and like the one that you said, Cici, like you make a resource that available for people that people can read it, people can access it. That's also a way of like engage people to learn more and know more. And also thank you for all of your guys' answer. Okay, I think we're not getting any other questions. Oh, we got question from the audience. Any other questions? I will open for 3 questions. Okay, you guys.
Well, at least mine. So I also work in the disaster and preparedness space, and can also speak to the importance of the youth voice, the youth power that it has, but also knowing that there's a lot of competing things for youth attention, be it the Harry Potter, the Call of Duty that you've mentioned, that you adapt the IHL campaigns to. But IHL is a very heavy topic, and same is for disaster relief and all the preparedness stuff. So I'm kind of wondering in the back of my head, how did you fall into the volunteer space and for such a heavy topic? And what is your motivation to stay among all of the ways that the entertainment or whatever is competing for youth?
Okay, thank you so much for the question. Okay, maybe this is such an interesting question because for me, that's also one of my question, like how do you guys really interested in this kind of topic, and how you guys like motivate yourself to stay in and even go on and on. I heard that some of you even been for like 4 years, 2 years, and so on. And how do you guys have the motivation, and how do you guys like really into it, into the habit of it and so on? Any of you want to start?
Okay. I have kind of 2 parts, both my answer and kind of just what I've seen based off of my involvement over the past 5 years with the organization. I think the first part is that this idea of international humanitarian law or disaster relief or these big words that adults use, right, being daunting to youth, that's definitely something that exists and still exists. But I think we're moving towards a culture where it's more like exciting for youth now. So in the past, we can say, oh, like when a youth hears that, it's very daunting for them or things like that. And you definitely need to acknowledge that that was something that happens. But I think, working alongside the incredible youth volunteers that I have and also attending the conference with so many PMI youth, hearing us say international humanitarian law and then receiving a question immediately from a PMI youth about how they can get involved or how they can make a direct impact in telling the adults or the people on the front lines of war that they're doing something wrong. It's so empowering to see them interested in it, right? Them ready to literally tackle an adult right on the head about this topic. So that's one thing. I do want to settle that. And then I think in terms of how I got involved and how I continue being motivated to stay involved, I first got involved, for starters, I think just general interest in, reading the news, reading about these international conflicts, but then also I want to go back to that piece and that theme that we emphasize a lot in our presentation, but the idea of empowerment. Seeing more and more of my friends get involved in it has empowered me, inspired me to also be in that space. And I think something that was a really interesting story that Shivam and I actually heard from a youth engagement lead in the Canadian Red Cross was her speaking about how when she was a really young girl, she was given the responsibility of putting stamps on paper, and something that, perhaps adults did, but was so fun for her and something that she was capable of doing, and how it made her feel even more empowered to keep asking for tasks that would, like elevate or go up the ladder of like responsibility or things like that. And I think that's something that I also feel getting involved in programs like the International Humanitarian Law Youth Action Campaign, being able to first, talk about those topics is one step. And then second, being able to serve as a leader and inspire other youth to talk about those topics is another step. And then third, as part of, some of our leaders here, getting to directly speak with, policy leaders and, policymakers in certain meetings. And, the American Red Cross giving us that kind of space, it makes us almost hungry for more and hungry to do more within the organization. And I think that's what keeps me involved and that's what keeps me going continuously.
Such a really inspiring answer for me personally. Thank you, Sissy. Any of you want to answer?
Yeah, so I kind of wanted to go off of something that Sissy said with PMI youth being really interested in what we are saying. Like, we had so many people coming up to us, and like I have a list of emails on my phones of kids that were involved with the PMI Red Cross, Indonesian Red Cross, that when they heard about international humanitarian law were like, I want to know more. Like, tell me more. How can I get involved? So I definitely think it's really important to highlight that what Sissy was saying. I think for me personally, I did, like many people, I didn't know about international humanitarian law until I got involved with the Red Cross. And what kind of makes me keep coming back to it and makes me want to stay is just seeing the impact that this program has. And like we saw in the presentation, the event that happened in Texas, there's a tangible impact to what we're doing. And yes, a lot of the stuff we do is just talking, sitting, like going into events, raising awareness, talking, but there's a very tangible impact to what we're doing. And seeing that impact over and over again draws me and a lot of other youth volunteers back to just keep coming back and keep being involved.
Okay, thank you, Cara. Shivam, you want to go?
Yeah, and definitely, and that's a great question. And it brings up a good point on what walls we have put up right now for where and why youth can volunteer and engage in. So definitely there are some walls. A 12-year-old should not go and deploy for a disaster. That cannot happen. But it begs the question: someone that's a little bit older, what can they do now, right? There are laws that the organization has on when you can deploy. There are several trainings you have to meet. You have to go through relatively rigorous curriculum to get you up to speed to go and deploy for a disaster, for example, or to go internationally. Even there's a whole other set of trainings you need to do that. But it begs the question: a 15 or 16-year-old that can't do that, what can they do now? And Kara and Sissy were talking a little bit about once you find out that you can actually do things right now at your home, on your phone, or with your peers in your school. it empowers you to do even more and search for other ways that you can engage. That's not just deploying internationally. So finding those walls and identifying if they're really important to set up those boundaries. It's definitely a valid concern. But which ones we can break down and actually bring in youth in the work that we're doing, because again, at some point in time, they're going to be the ones deploying. They're going to be the ones creating those policies. So if we educate them and have give enough experience early on, they're going to be the ones that are doing the work that we're doing now. So it's finding the why, and that's important, but also showcasing and highlighting that youth are still able to do work at any age. That's how I engaged with the Sound the Alarm initiative. I had no idea I was able to go into someone's house and install a smoke alarm and talk to them and educate them. But once I did, it sort of sparked something in me that, hey, maybe there's other things I can do. So that empower piece that we've been talking about for the last hour is very important, and I think that also highlights the question that you brought up.
Okay, so Sarah, you want to add anything?
Yeah, sure. So I think Sissy and Kara, they brought up a very interesting point, which is remaining involved due to the people around you. So one of the biggest topics we talked about in our presentation was empowering other youth. And of course, we don't want to take away the seriousness of international humanitarian law. But using these these topics and simulations that kind of are familiar to youth kind of draws them in. And of course, while keeping the seriousness of international humanitarian law intact in whatever activity that is hosted, youth are just so interested in what international humanitarian law actually is. And I think it's also really interesting because when we were talking with the PMI youth, they were so incredibly interested in what international humanitarian law was, just because there was nothing left. From what I know, I don't believe international humanitarian law youth action program is established in some of the provinces in Indonesia. So just that curiosity and fueling that curiosity is so
Like they really want to
important.
know
They
what
wanna
is
know.
that, and
Yeah.
they really want to know how to implement that.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. So there's obviously a side that's very daunting about international humanitarian
Mhm.
law, but there's also a really beautiful side that we got to see throughout our trip here, which was the genuine interest that youth have in this program. And yeah, so I think it's really, really special.
Really beautiful. Okay. This is such a really insightful session for me, and I hope this is also such an insightful session for you guys. Does anyone in here has any other questions? No? Okay, so I will close with one last question for all of you guys. Can you guys share to us, like, what is the most valuable lesson that you guys got from being a volunteers? And maybe you can also like promoting, and maybe that will be some inspiring story that you guys get, and people will also interested to be a volunteer. Anyone want you share something?
So just to convert, it's just a lesson that you've learned.
Yeah, lesson that you learned.
Yeah, I think listening. So I think I have genuinely developed the skill to listen and to absorb knowledge as best as I can. So we're all young here, and there's a lot of people that we work with that are far more experienced and knowledgeable than us, and are leaders in different spaces. And the only way that we can look up to them is by listening and learning about their experiences, their stories, and hopefully living up to the work that they're doing. The Red Cross has allowed me to speak to so many different people and so many different backgrounds. It's allowed me to come to here to listen to some of your questions and to learn a little bit about the work that you all are doing. But a lot of it is based in listening, taking a step back to know that I may not know everything. I definitely do not know everything, but there are a lot of people that know a whole lot more about a specific topic, and it's put me in a position where I can sit down and listen and hear about their stories, because at the end of the day, we all exchange stories, and that's the best way to pass on information. And so my trip to Indonesia has been filled with listening and learning about the organization that we have here with PMI, and hearing about different ways that we can bring strategies of youth engagement that we have that PMI has used back to the U.S. and that same experiences back from the U.S. to Indonesia. So I just want to thank you all for giving this opportunity for us to talk to you. But I also want to open the opportunity to
Okay.
to also listen to you all and hear about your story. So I'll pass it to anybody else.
Yeah. Anybody else want to share like their lesson?
Yeah, so like Shivam said, listening.
Mhm.
We speak with a lot of people that do such incredible work. So, just listening to how they run things and their experiences, it's just so important. But I would also like to say that taking risks is also a very big thing. When I first started out in this organization, just personally, public speaking, not my thing. But
But you're doing great.
but but ultimately it's just taking those risks and searching for opportunities that will allow you to grow as an individual, whether it be developing leadership opportunities, learning something new. That's kind of the biggest lesson I've learned, is just don't be afraid of taking those opportunities. While they might be daunting, they will nurture you in a way that no other opportunity or no other scenario could ever do. So taking those risks and just um, putting yourself in roles that you might never have seen yourself ever be put in, it definitely helps you grow, and it allows you to empower other people as well to do the same.
Yeah, as people say that you grow from challenge, right? Yeah. I like that saying. Okay, any of you guys want to share their lessons or like something that you get?
I can go really quickly. I loved taking risks and listening. Those were great, Shivam and Sarah. I think something for me that I've learned a lot is about creating actionable next steps. There have been a lot of times where we create really ambitious goals and really we are very visionary youth, I think, but creating goals that are very lofty or change or impact that we want to make, but realizing the small steps that it takes to get to a goal, I think is really important. Being able to, digest something that is large and ambitious into the small pieces that are necessary has been really important, and having that patience to do so.
Ooh, patience. That's a very good thing to learn about. How about you, Kara?
Yeah, so I think one thing that I've learned is what finding what you're passionate about and using that to help other people. So before I started with the Red Cross, I think I and a lot of other people, I associate it with blood drives, like we talked about. That's one of the big programs of like, oh, American Red Cross is involved with blood drives, and medical services was never something I was interested in, so didn't really think anything of it. But I always liked history, politics, law, that kind of thing. And so finding what you're passionate about and finding a niche within the volunteer space, you can use what you're passionate about to help people. And it doesn't have to be necessarily blood drives, blood services, things like that. And that goes beyond just like the American Red Cross, but just if you're passionate about something and you enjoy something, you're good at something, find a way that you can use that to help other people, because it's an amazing experience to be able to use what you're passionate about to help someone else.
Okay. Can I get a very big round of applause for our speakers? Thank you so much. Thank you so much. This is such a very insightful and good discussion. I hope you guys learn a lot. And also, thank you for the presence of everyone that joining online and offline in this afternoon. I mean, rather than spending time in coffee and spending time in shopping or something, you guys really just watch and listening and getting knowledge. Thank you for doing that. Okay, I would like to close this afternoon session. Thank you so much for our togetherness, and then see you guys in our next discussion. Going back to our e-guide. Thank you.
All right. Thank you so much to all of our panelists. Thank you, Shivam, Kara, Sisi, and Sarah, and also Kael Shea for the wonderful discussion. And we hope that everyone can get lots of insights from today's session. Earlier in the event, we had a trivia question, and the question was, when was the American Red Cross founded? Was it A, 1870, B, 1881, C, 1901, or D, 1919? And the correct answer to that is B, 1881. Shout out to @agam.arif from Instagram for being the fastest to answer it correctly. And thank you so much to everyone else who has participated. Don't forget to check out our social media. We are on Facebook, YouTube, Instagram, and Twitter at ATAmerica. You can also go through our website at www.atamerica.or.id. Again, with that, it is time to say goodbye. Thank you so much, everyone. My name is Adila, and I will see you at the next At America event. Bye-bye.